We created this series of workshops with a desire to create some advanced sessions for people who have been to some of our training or might have some experience with Springboard as some additional offerings. We know that the university is really focused on retention right now, so we wanted to find ways that we could help with the things that we know and what we do to help teach you some of the things that we know help impact retention. This is the first workshop in the series. Obviously, you signed up for this series, so you got on the ITL site and saw the other ones. Know that we're going to offer them all face-to-face. They're all available via WebEx if you can't make it. We're also going to record all of them and make them available in the future. So if you can't come to all of them, know that we will have those options available for you too. Okay, so I'm just going to jump right into our topic for the day. If you all would like to get signed into Springboard, I'll show you the classroom that I created for this that has our examples in it. And then you all should have a Springboard sandbox. Steve went in last night, and if you didn't already have a sandbox, he made you a new one. So it should just be some course titled sandbox. And those of you on WebEx, when I pause here to let the people here take a minute, feel free to minimize WebEx for a second and go poke around Springboard as well. I want this to be as hands-on as possible at a distance. I know that's a little bit harder, but I'm still going to take those pauses, so feel free to use those to go look at your Springboard classroom to get some practice as we're doing this. Okay. Is everybody logged into Springboard? Perfect. So you should all see a new course called DDS Tools for Retention. My screen looks a little bit different than yours because I have a longer list of classes. If you don't see it, you can change this all roles. You can change this to student because you're all in there as a student. I'm going to minimize this participant. Get rid of some of these things so I can have more space on my screen. So does everybody see the tools for retention? Okay, perfect. Yes, the Springboard session. So mine is going to look a little bit different from yours because you are all in the classroom as a student and I'm in as an instructor. When we start practicing some things, I will let you go into your sandbox to try these things in the place where you're the instructor. So this is where we're going to put all the materials for all the Tools for Retention series workshops. So if you want help guides and things, the other workshops, they'll be in here too. We're going to get started by clicking on Content. Okay, perfect. Yes, and once you're in there, go ahead and click on Content. And we're going to get started with this conversation by me showing you what this looks like from the instructor side and what it looks like on your course from the student side. So I've got the module Release Conditions and Intelligent Agents, got some details at the top. And when I scroll down, if you want to look at my screen for a second, you can see I have a couple different items in here. I have the Release Conditions survey, and then I have Release Conditions and Intelligent Agents handout. You guys can't see the handout on your screen, can you? Okay, the reason for that is this little line underneath that says all conditions must be met, complete one attempt on the survey, and then it tells you the title of the survey. So I wanted to show you this example to get started to give you a visual representation of how release conditions work. What they are is they're a tool that you can use in almost every tool in Springboard. The handout has a list on the front page of what tools you can use release conditions. And it allows you to hide that item until the student does something else. So for example, this release condition and intelligent agents handout is hidden until the student has completed one attempt on the survey, release condition survey, and that's the one right above it. So there are many different reasons that we could use a tool like this. One of my areas of research that you know very well comes down is one of the reasons for this, which is creating personalized learning experiences. So that for the students, we help them have specific resources that meet where they are in the course or where they are in their learning. So for example, I might put a quiz in my course and say if students get a 50 to a 75% on this quiz, then I'm going to give them this remedial worksheet. If students get 100%, then they don't have to do anything else and they just move on. Other examples of reasons you might use this include forcing students to do assignments in a specific order. One really great example that I really love is something that Jody Henderson-Ross in sociology does. She makes her students take a reading check quiz before they're allowed to participate in the discussion for the week. So she doesn't want students just discussing off the top of their head. She wants them to pass the reading check quiz before they jump into that discussion. She puts a release condition on the discussion board that they literally can't see it or access it until they have gotten a high enough grade on the reading check quiz. I think it's like 80 or 85%. So she's just using that to force them to go in a specific order. Another way I know it's been used is in a lot of our composition courses. Students have to click on all of the items so that they read all the material in the course before they're allowed to see the assignment instructions. So that's similar, but in that case, it was all the pages in Springboard that they set it up with. And here Dudley's giving the example. He had a student take a quiz before they could go on, and that's a really common example. I know a lot of people require students to take a syllabus quiz. Using release conditions to make sure that they can't do anything else until they've read the syllabus and passed the quiz is another good way that we could use this. I've specifically been talking about content examples, but there are lots of other different things that you could have them do. So a lot of these different tools allow you to include release conditions, and when we get in here and start building them, I'll show you the list of all of the examples. But does anybody have questions about kind of like the framework for why this works this way? Does that make sense? Okay, so excellent. In order to give us an opportunity to try this, if everyone can be in the Tools for Attention site, and then go ahead and take the release condition survey, and it's just a one-question survey, so you can see what it looks like when you meet that release condition and then the other materials pop up. So you need to click Save and then click Submit, and then you should be able to see it. Dudley, let me know if that works. Perfect. Okay. And I impersonated here my student Tony Stark, and now that I've completed the survey, I can see that handout. And that handout is this handout, so the health guide handout that goes along with this workshop. Okay, I'm going to be done with Tony Stark and go back to my instructor setup. Okay, so that's the basics of how these work. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go into your sandboxes. So pick any sandbox classroom you want to use. If you've got those of you who are sitting in this room, and I know Dudley and Misty, you probably have a couple sandboxes. So whichever one works for you, any place you want to go build and practice, that's a live classroom for your students, go into there, and we'll practice building these. So I'm going to switch to my sandbox. And we're going to start with the content page because I think that is probably the easiest to use. That's perfect. Okay, so depending on what you have in your sandbox, I'm just going to upload a generic file to give myself something to actually work with. So on the content page, I'm going to do upload files. This works. Okay. Apparently I picked something that's so slow. It's okay. Okay. So I now have an item under content in order for me to practice this. Does everybody have something that they can put a release condition on? Okay. So Naomi, do you have a file or a link or something in there that you could practice with? Okay, perfect. That's totally fine. Nope. Perfect. So you just want to have a file or a link or anything that you can practice with. Okay. So the important thing to remember about release conditions is you're going to put the release condition on the thing that you want to either appear or disappear. So in my previous example, the release condition wasn't attached to the survey, it was attached to the document I wanted to appear or disappear. So remember to put it in the right place. The way we find the release conditions tool is right next to your topic title, so your link or your file, whatever it is. Click the drop-down menu and then choose Edit Properties in Place. And then we're going to click on Add Dates and Restrictions. This is the exact same place you would go if you were adding a start date or an end date. Some of you have probably been in here before and just ignored this conditions down below, but that is where we find this. That's where we find this tool. And on the content page, this release conditions tool is the exact same for any type of topic you have in here. So if you have a discussion board you want to hide, if you have a quiz you want to hide, any of those things, it's always click the drop-down menu, Edit Properties in Place, and then Add Dates and Restrictions. So now what we're going to do is we're going to create a release condition. So go ahead and click on Create. So we have this first drop-down menu, and if you click the drop-down menu, you can see what our different options are here. So this is set up so that we're going to identify the thing that students have to do in order to make this appear. So you can see that we have a lot of different things on this list. We have awards, we have checklists. Checklists are a really good way to use release conditions if you have a lot of different things you want your students to do, or if you're finding that they're having a hard time completing all their work. Either they're unorganized, they're freshmen students, any of those things. If you want to help students be more organized, setting up a checklist where it's do this, do this, do this, and then once they've checked all the checkboxes, it then releases the thing you want. That is a really good way to help students stay organized. We can do class lists. So this is really good for if you have groups in your course. So for example, you have one group who you want to read one article and write about it, and you have another group who you want to read a different article and write about it. Yes, you could write in the description field, group 1 read this, group 2 read this article. But you can also use the release conditions specifically to release the different items to those different groups. So that way they can't possibly get confused as to what they're supposed to do. Competencies, if you're using the competencies tool. Content, some of the examples I gave you specifically related to content. So the comp courses, they have to click on all of the pages in Springboard in order to be able to release their assignment. One important thing I want to note about content is Springboard doesn't actually have a way to know whether or not a student read the content. They just know whether or not they clicked on the link. So that's important to remember when you're setting these up. It's definitely better to say they have to have clicked on the link than nothing, but remember that this doesn't guarantee that they actually read it. And an interesting thing in here that is actually new to the release conditions since the last summer when we updated Springboard is there are now some release conditions that are not conditions. So for example, the student has not visited a content topic. So let's say, for example, your student has not visited your syllabus, you could release some sort of, maybe like so a way that I've seen this used is there's a big news item on the front page of your course that's in big red letters that says, don't do anything until you've read the syllabus. And if they haven't read the syllabus yet, then that is still the only thing that they can see. And you could set it up so that that news item is there because they haven't clicked on the syllabus yet. And then once they have clicked on the syllabus, this release condition will change, and then that big warning news item will go away for them. So that's the way that this could work. Also under content, there's one that is visited all content topics, and it's important to know that this is all content topics in your entire course, not just one individual module. So if you want to do an individual module, you have to do each of the links. They have visited this link, and then another release condition, and then another release condition, because you can stack these. So you can have multiple release conditions on the exact same item. But remember that visited all content topics is all the content topics in the course. And I've seen instructors who have done cute things where they like release an award or like a funny video or something at the end of the class as a incentive or as a congratulations to students for having completed all of the content topics. We can do discussion posts, so posts authored in a topic and then also no post authored in a topic. So again, for those not operators, it's helpful as reminder. So if you want to give students a reminder to do something, you can always use the release this message if they have not visited the content topic. There's also a score and an associated rubric. It's important to remember here that the rubrics they're not auto-graded, so this won't happen until you go in and you physically grade it. And that's totally fine as long as you remember to include that in your strategy. If you want students to post to the discussion board and then immediately go do something else, you wouldn't want to use the score on the associated rubric release condition because they would still be locked out of that thing until you graded the discussion post. And that's the same as we go down through the assessment tools with how the score and the rubrics work. So now we get into the assignments, quizzes are down below, grades, all of those things. So you can release it based on a submission to a folder, no submission to a folder, receives feedback, or score and associated rubric. I've seen receives feedback used to not let, so like this was also in a comp course, the students had to turn in a second draft of their work or like a revision of their work. They weren't allowed to actually submit to that until they'd actually received feedback on the first one because they wanted the instructor revisions or the instructor comments to be included in the revisions. So that was one good way that I saw that used. And then grades. So grade value, no grade received, score and associated rubric again. We can do quizzes. And this is, remember, quizzes are the thing that can be auto-graded. I used a survey for our example. I just wanted them to complete, I just wanted you to complete the example to see it. But quiz scores can be used to automatically release other things, so that doesn't have to wait for you. Completed just an attempt, score on a selected question. So if you have specific questions that you want them to have a score for, you can make this really granular. And then again, associated rubric, no completed quiz attempts, and then we've got surveys down at the bottom. So there are a lot of different options in here for the ways that you can set all of these things up. So since we are in the, what's a good one to do? Because we didn't create anything in here specifically. Let's do, oh, I don't know. Let's do visited content topic. We'll just use this as an example. Okay, you know what, actually we're not going to do that because that's going to create a problem if you only have one file in there like I do. Let's do class list, and we'll do org unit enrollment, and that just, org unit is just the class. So sorry, if you already clicked it and went out of it, you can always just change the drop-down menu. And we're going to do org unit enrollment. The only reason I did that was because I only have one file in here, and this next part wouldn't have worked if I only had one file in here. So down below, now that we have selected the condition type, we get to choose what we want to actually have them do for that. So here I'm going to click on the blue link, select org unit. Usually this is just another drop-down menu, but they all work exactly the same. So I'm going to do select org unit. And this will give you a list of all of your classes. My list looks very different than yours, and we actually don't have to choose any of these. For our example, you could pick whichever one you want to pick. But let me tell you a little bit about how this one works specifically. This is really good if you are doing, I'm going to use Naomi as an example because I know you teach the field courses. If a student is enrolled in a field course, you might want them to see something different in their class. So for example, they're a last semester student. If they're already enrolled in the field course, you want them to see one thing. If they're not enrolled in the field course, you want them to see something different. So this is a really cool tool to use if they're enrolled in a different class. It's really useful at the program level to help make sure that students are getting the right information for their right situation. So we can actually pick any of these. because either way it'll still tell us, it'll still show us the right information on this page to do our. So just go ahead and click any of these and then scroll down to the bottom and click Insert. And you'll see now that it has listed my options down here. I can always click Select Org Unit again to change this. But you can only put one situation in each release condition. When I said you can stack them, you just create more. Okay, so I'm going to click Create at the bottom. And we now have a drop-down menu here. All conditions must be met, or any condition must be met. If you're stacking your release conditions where you have a couple of them, you can set it so that any condition must be met instead of all of them. So let's say, for example, my students have to have completed one of 2 surveys, or have read one of 2 articles. Once they've read one of those 2 articles, I can then let them move on if that's what I want to do. When I'm done, I click Update. And you can see now that my release condition is listed down under that content topic on the page for me. Now, an important thing to remember about this part is that students cannot see the release condition. Because it is hidden, because this entire topic is hidden from them, they can't see this release condition to know what they have to do in order to see the materials we've hidden from them. And that is really important. On this worksheet, it lists some best practices for creating release conditions. I included those on the handout because they're really good about the technical aspects, some things about setting up release conditions. But my #1 recommendation, my #1 best practice when it comes to using release conditions is you need to make sure you very clearly explain to students what you expect them to do in order to move on. So if they have to take the syllabus quiz in order to see their materials for week 1, but you don't tell them that, they might think you haven't put anything in your classroom yet. And they don't know that you're actually waiting on them to take some action to move on. If they have to complete a quiz in order to see the discussion board for the week, they just might think that the discussion board hasn't come up yet, and they're waiting on you. Another big thing is they will look at the syllabus and know that there's supposed to be something there, and then you will get 10,000 emails. So the best thing to do about all of this is make sure you clearly communicate to them exactly what is expected in terms of how you've used release conditions in the course and what they need to do in order to move on. To go along with that, release conditions are best used in some sort of consistent strategy. I mean, the syllabus quiz is a special situation. You only have 1 syllabus quiz in your course. But if you're going to set it up that they have to take a reading check quiz before they can move on every week, it's best to do that every week. That way they know exactly what to expect through the entire semester rather than having it be really different every time. And there are many different places that you can put that. My recommendation is always put instructions closest to the item you want them to use or like where you want them to do something. So yes, talk about release conditions in your syllabus, but putting it right in the description of the module I think is also a really great place to put it. So you might say, for example, in order to see all materials for this week, you must complete the quiz first or something like that. And you could copy that into every single module so that they have a reminder every week. And we know that even though, like, we want students to read instructions and we think that they should be able to figure this out and we think that they should remember this from last week, in order to save everyone the least amount of stress, students when they can't find things, the faculty from getting emails, answering easy questions, it's best to just repeat those instructions any place where you've used this tool. Does that make sense? Perfect. Okay, so that is all of the basics of setting up release conditions. I'm going to give you guys a couple minutes to practice this. I think that there are 2 different ways that you could approach this practice guide. So one, you could go look in an existing or a previous course and think about a way that you might be able to use release conditions. Or if you'd rather dig into the tool, feel free to just add as many other release conditions as you want in this to practice seeing what's possible. Does that make sense? Correct. Your sandbox is just for you. So we're going to take I'll give you about 10 minutes. I'm going to walk around the room. We're going to watch we're going to moderate the WebEx chat and send any questions that you guys have in order to get us started with that. That's a really good question. I'm going to set up my microphone and answer that question so that everybody else can hear it too. So she asked a really excellent question. She said if she sets a release condition, goes in as a student to practice it, she meets that condition, does whatever the thing is to meet the condition, how does she reset it to see it? And that is an unfortunate setup of all of this because you can't reset it.
No, it is great.
That's a situation where it would be totally appropriate for you to contact GDS and have one of us help you check your stuff. We won't do it for you, but we have a lot of experience with this, so a lot of times we would be able to look at something and give you a better idea if it's set up correctly, or we can give you like a test student account that the test student can practice it. That way you have a couple times to test it. But yeah, that's.
Yeah.
Okay. So there are a few more, there's one detail about release conditions that I saw that I missed, and then we're going to jump into talking about intelligent agents. So one thing that I want to show you, and you don't even need to follow along, you just can take a look at my screen for a second, is I'm going to edit this release condition. In here, well, okay, so if I have existing release conditions and I want to edit the release conditions, you can see when I hover my mouse just over the top of the title, it becomes a gray box. That in Springboard tells you that you can click on this and you can edit it. If I want to delete a release condition, there's the X to the right. But I can also add a release condition that I've already created. So let's say you're doing that syllabus quiz and you want to hide a whole bunch of things based on the syllabus quiz. You do not have to go in and create that syllabus quiz release condition a whole bunch of times. You can click Browse instead of Create. And this allows you to pick from your existing list of release conditions, so you can just continue attaching this one to the different items that you want to use. So that saves you some time there. Okay, so that was the detail that I realized I had missed about all of the release conditions. One of the things I really liked as we were going around, that you guys seem to be coming up with a lot of different ways that you can use these in your course. The most common mistake I see with release conditions, I'm sorry, I'm looking for my charger, my laptop is dying. One of the most common mistakes I see with release conditions is that you attach the release condition to the wrong item. You attach it to the item that is the trigger rather than the thing you want to hide. Remember that you put the release condition on the thing that you want to be hidden until students do something else. You don't have to do anything with that item that triggers it. So in our example, you don't have to do anything with the syllabus quiz. The syllabus quiz is fine. It's whatever you want to hide as a result of the syllabus quiz. That's where you would place the release condition. Okay, so the purpose of this workshop was to talk about two different topics, release conditions and intelligent agents. Intelligent agents are a totally different topic, but you have to understand release conditions in order to effectively be able to use intelligent agents. What intelligent agents do is they allow you to set Springboard to automatically send an email to your students when they do or don't do something in your class. So for example, you can set it up so that if a student hasn't logged into Springboard in 3 days, they get a reminder email of how important it is to access course materials in an online course. If a student gets a good grade on a quiz or a poor grade on a quiz, you can automatically send them an email that is a reminder to access remedial information or a congratulations on good work. So the strength of intelligent agents is it allows you to automate a lot of communication with your students. There's an example that I really love that I put in the Tools for Retention classroom. You guys don't necessarily need to go find it. I'm going to pull it up just so you guys know that it's here. But I called it the Case Study on Intelligent Agents. And this is an instructor who, she won a Brightspace Excellence Award a few years ago for her work specifically with intelligent agents in a gigantic freshman psychology course. So she had 2,100 students, and I mean, obviously several graduate students to help her with this. But she had 2,100 students, and she used intelligent agents. There's a video where she goes, that I put in here too, that goes through, she's got something like 50 intelligent agents that she uses in her course. And they're very granular. It is a congratulations for every quiz that they finish. It is a, now that you finish module 1, move on to module 2. A lot of those like administrative or logistical messages that you would send to students to help lead them through the course as well as encourage them and congratulate them on good work. She automated those, which is what helped her be able to get through having such a large course. Yes, they will copy over along with their entire course. This is one of those things that while we're setting it up, it's going to feel like a lot of work to create a congratulations and a reminder study email for every single quiz, because I mean, if you have 15 quizzes, that's now 30 emails to write. But like many other things in Springboard, if you invest a little bit of time now and a little bit of time in the future, just like continue to build your list of intelligent agents as you go along, because they copy over, all that work will save you time in the future. And intelligent agents, since this is the topic of retention, they have a really big impact on student presence, on social presence. That's the word I'm looking for. Social presence is the concept where your students feel like there's another human being on the other side of the computer. And even though they're receiving an automated email, really, they're reading an email that you personally wrote. They don't have to know that it was automatically sent out. Even if they do figure out that it was automatically sent out, that doesn't diminish the fact that you're still sending them a congratulations or a reminder about something else. So in terms of helping with retention, it helps students really connect with you personally and feel like there's a human being invested in their education. And I'll show you when we dig into the settings how to set all of the things up to get them to run automatically, as well as what to do at the beginning of the semester in order to get started. Okay, so let's go ahead and dig into the intelligent agents tool. Depending on what nav bar you have in your course, you're either going to click on My Tools, or on the right, you're going to click, I think it's More. Intelligent agents might be in your list. If intelligent agents isn't specific in your list, you can always click Course Admin and then Intelligent Agents. We used to do a really good job of having all the exact same nav bars, and then we did some changes and changed some colors and moved some things around. And as we move forward, we're going to make sure that we always tell you exactly where to find everything. Lenny, it says you left the meeting. Oh, you turned off your computer. Oh, okay. No. Okay. Perfect. Okay, thank you. So did everybody find intelligent agents? Okay. So this is just my example from earlier. We'll come back to that later. But the first thing we're going to do to get started is we're going to click New. Now, before I dig into this, I'm going to tell you right now there are tons and tons of different settings in here. The handout that I gave you, the handout that's in the Springboard classroom, gives you a good overview of the settings. There's also another article that I put under, or another help guide that is in content of the Tools for Retention series that is an additional way to look at all of the settings, because I know that there are just so many that sometimes it can be confusing. So I provided 2 help guides to help you get through the settings when you go home and you're working on it. Okay, so the first thing is the agent name. Remember I told you that you could do things like a congratulations for a high quiz score, or a reminder to study more, or a reminder to look at the remediation materials. On that first page, you saw that all it told me was my title, so I suggest you make the title of this agent a short description of what it does. So for example, quiz 1, congratulations, and then another one might be quiz 2, reminder to study, or quiz 2, remediation, or reminder to look at the APA formatting, stuff like that. So make your title descriptive so that it tells you what it does just based on the title. So I'm going to go with quiz 1, remediate. Actually, I'm going to start with that example that I gave you of login history because that's probably the easiest one to get started with, and then we'll loop back to the quizzes. So I'll call this login reminder. The description is just for you, so you don't have to worry about that if you do not want to. That's just information for you. Here, when Wendy was talking about how you have to turn these on, you can enable this as you're building it. You'll have to come back in and change these settings. This is one of the things you need to make sure that you do at the beginning of this semester is enable your agent. So just click this to get us started.
So, should we not put a delay that
you do have to enable every agent. Well, that's a lot of clicks. It's kind of a safeguard for you so that you have to look at the list and say, oh, I changed this and I took this out of my course. This doesn't apply anymore. A reminder that you need to replace something. So, yes, it's a lot of work, but it prevents you from sending emails that don't make any sense to your students. Okay, so we have I'm just down below agent is enabled, and then we have two different options under login activity. This is why I said that the intelligent agents make more sense when you understand release conditions, because now you have an understanding of different things in your course triggering something happen. So right now we're talking about different login activity that could trigger your student getting this email. Down below we'll actually write the email, but we have some different options in here. So we have login activity and course activity. And Wendy, I'm fairly positive, but I want to make sure that I'm correct. Login activity is login for Springboard, correct? And course activity is actually being in the course. Okay. That's important to remember because you probably don't care whether or not your students are logging in and looking at all of their other courses and still ignoring your stuff. But for things like field or a department level program or something like that, Springboard login could be helpful, so that's why it's here. But we're going to look at course activity because they both work the exact same. So take action when the following course activity criteria are satisfied. So if we're going to use course login activity, we can do this one. Check that checkbox. User has not accessed course for at least, and you can put however many days in here you want. Or user has accessed course during the past X amount of days. So remember I said we can use it for remediation and encouragement. This is kind of like the positive and the negative situation. They haven't logged in for a little while, or you can also send them an email if they've logged in every single day. This number will be very different based on the specifics of your course. So if you're teaching a 2-week or like a 2-week inter-session course or a 3-week inter-session course, if your student doesn't log in for 1 day, they're probably way behind. In that situation, I would probably send both a message if they haven't logged in 1 day. I would also probably send an encouragement email that says, if the user has logged in the past day, send them this reminder. And I would send them an encouragement email, something like, I see that you've logged in every day. You've done a really good job in this course. Please keep up the pace. I know that it's rigorous. It only lasts 3 weeks, something like that. If it's a full 15-week course, maybe 3 days isn't appropriate. Maybe unless you have something that they need to be in there for middle of the week assignments, 3 days might not be appropriate for a 15-week course because we know some of like our adult students or students who work and things like that, they might do all their homework on the weekend. They might block out 16 hours to do your stuff over the weekend. So if you're bugging them in the middle of the week, you might give them a lot of anxiety or make them think that they're doing something wrong when they really do have a plan. So be strategic about this number based on what you know about your students and what you know of the length of the course. I'd say probably like 3 days for a shorter class, maybe 3 days for a summer class, for an 8-week summer class, 1 day for an inter-session class, and maybe 5 or 7 days for a 15-week course. Okay, so I'm going to skip some of this other stuff for a second so that we can finish our login email. And I'm going to scroll down to, let's go to agent action. So we have, under this agent action section, we have both repetition and schedule. There are a couple different ways that you can trigger this to start. So they're not just automatic as soon as you save it, it happens. You have to tell the intelligent agent when you actually want it to run. So repetition is important. Take action only the first time the criteria is satisfied, or take action every time it's satisfied. If we're talking about that login history one, that would probably be every time. If we're talking about a congratulations email for quiz 1, we probably don't need it to be sent more than one time during the semester, so just the first time. You can think through strategically how you can use that. And in all the other places in Springboard, they have a gray question mark that you click on to get more information. For some reason in Intelligent Agents, it's these little blue links underneath. So know that you have a lot of help information in here, so I can click on this and it'll give me more information about the repetition for in the future when you're coming back and building your own Intelligent Agents. This will help you make those decisions. Okay, and then schedule. So schedule is when we talked about make sure, like reasons you have to reset it every semester. Your course dates probably change if you go from a Monday, Wednesday class. Because Intelligent Agents work in face-to-face classes too. I tend to talk about online classes, but they definitely work in face-to-face classes as well. If your course goes from a Monday, Wednesday class to a Tuesday, Thursday class, you're going to have to change the way that these things work. So that's another reason why you will want to look at this stuff at the beginning of every semester. So you can set it up to use a schedule. I'll check the checkbox, and then I can do update schedule. And in here, I think this information is actually pretty self-explanatory, which is nice because some of these settings are not always very clear. So I can click on repeat how often, repeats every however many days, and you'll see that in here the only required one is this asterisk for the repeats every however many days. So it does ask you to specify a number of days. You'll see when you change to these different options, so it's default daily. When I get into weekly, it actually gives me a little bit more information. So it's repeat however many weeks, which days of the week. When I do monthly, it asks me on what day of the month. And when I do annually, it just tells me what day of the month. So this could be really, really helpful for field or things that repeat. So I'm going to go with weekly just because that seems like the one that had the most options to talk through. Were you going to say something? Oh. Okay, correct. Okay. And I don't know how if you guys use an electronic calendar, this setup to me seems very similar. You have similar options to like repeating calendar events. So when I look at this, that kind of helps me interpret what these different options are. So if I want this to do weekly, let's do every 2 weeks, repeat on Tuesday and Thursday, or let's just do Tuesday. So every other Tuesday it'll run the Intelligent Agent. And you can set a start date if you want. So like if I'm doing something that has to do with midterms, I'm reminding my students coming up to midterms or reminding them about something that's going to happen for midterms. I might want this to run every week or every 3 days leading up to midterms, but then I want it to be done. So these dates help you specify the time frame in which this happens. Okay, yes. So when that's totally fine. Wendy says yes, it will run after the class ends. That's why you would want to put an end date on it. And another thing is you can't necessarily specify the exact time that it runs. Like there's not a field to tell you exactly what time of the day it runs. Instead, what you do is if you set it up to run now, it'll just repeat at that time of day on whatever day you set it as.
Within a little bit of variation, that time.
Yes, within a little bit of variation, not exactly.
It depends, it depends how big you can work with your product. But for the most part.
So if you don't want it to run in the middle of the night, so your students don't think that you're available in the middle of the night, it would make sense to do this sometime during the day so that it'll run sometime during the day. Okay, I don't remember what I set my schedule. Let's do weekly every week on Tuesday, and we'll just use an example end date of the end of the semester. And you'll see that it lists what the schedule is here for me. And then we also have this blue link down below again, what does this agent schedule determine? And it'll give you a little bit more information. An important thing about this is if you don't specify a schedule, you'll have to run it manually. Once we've created this, I'll show you how to run it manually on that first page. And you can always do that too. Okay, so we've got the schedule, and now we're going to get to the actual email itself. So we've got the email format, HTML, plain text. Either of these is probably fine, unless the student reports a problem. If you have a student who tells you they can't see your emails, then maybe you want to change this to plain text. But for the most part, you don't have to worry about it. Just leave it to default. Okay, next we have the two CC and BCC lines. This is an opportunity for us to use those replace strings that we've used in other parts of Springboard. I'm going to pull it up on the screen for those of you who are looking at my screen. I'm going to, down below this link, what special email addresses can I use? That tells me what they are. For those of you who are sitting in the room, there's a list of them in this worksheet on the last page. The chart looks like this. So what replace strings are, if you haven't used these before, is it's a little bit of code that you can tell Springboard to display something different than what you actually wrote in. So for example, a very common one, and they look like this. They've got the curly brackets and then some information inside of it. A very common one is people will use first name in their news items. So it'll say, hello, Naomi, hello, Georgia, in order to personalize the information. What you do in order to get it to do that is you just copy and paste these. There are special release conditions in order to make the intelligent agents work because they talk about initiating user, and the initiating user is that person who basically like triggered this. So not every student is going to get this email, only as a student who did the thing that you specified, and that's why we have to use different replace strings. I honestly don't remember these off the top of my head because I just know that when I click this blue link, what special email addresses can I use? They're all right there for me, and I just copy and paste them out of here. So in order to make this intelligent agent work, in the to field, we're going to copy this where it says initiating user, and I just hit copy on my keyboard. And I'm going to put initiating user in the to field. And that's all you have to put there. And then you have the carbon copy and the blind carbon copy lines if you want to copy these to yourself. I personally only teach one class, so I have one set of 29 students, and I want to know when my intelligent agents run, and I like getting it in my email box, and that makes it easy for me. Some instructors, many instructors have way too many students, and that would be a lot of clutter in their inbox, so you might not copy it to yourself, but you can also copy it to yourself and then just set up an email rule so it filters them out of your main folder. If that's something that you decide you want to do in the future, where it just automatically will go to an intelligent agents folder, and then you can go and look in that folder instead of having it all come to your inbox and clog up your inbox. If you want to do that in the future and you don't know how, let us know and we will help you with that. So it's up to you whether you decide you want to put yourself in here. I always do. And if you've used intelligent agents in the past, there is something to know about this, the way that it works now, and then as we move forward, there's a better part of this in the Springboard update. So in future versions of Springboard, if that's the direction that we go, they've made it so that the email address, you can specify where it comes from, and it will look like it's coming. The current situation is that it comes from support@uakron.edu, which is less than ideal because then when your students hit reply, they're opening a support ticket instead of actually emailing you back. But in the future, you'll be able to change that. So if as the update goes along and depending on how that all goes through, if we decide that we're going to go with Springboard, the future versions of Springboard allow that to be specified so that you can change it. Is that good? So there is someone who figured all of those steps out and very graciously put them on the internet for us. I have not tested it. It sounds theoretically like it would work, but I haven't ever done it. But the way you're thinking about it should work.
I did.
Oh, okay.
It did.
Perfect.
Yeah. I forget, I was looking at it.
I don't, I'm sorry.
I'll pull it up. I'll pull up the instructions for you. There's a way that it's there. Yeah, I'll add them to the.
Okay.
Yeah, there is a way to hack it right now. I would have never thought of it when you used it, but
I didn't put it in there just because I hadn't tested it yet. Since Wendy has tested it and knows that it actually works, then I am confident sharing it.
Are we initiating?
So we had a good question because one of the options in here is initiating auditor. And that is more for if your student has some sort of advisor involved who pays attention to their grades at a more granular level than our academic advisors do. You could have it copy them, but that's not something that we use at Akron. So the initiating user, it will look at all of the students in the course, and then it will only send it to the students who have actually triggered this intelligent agent. So depending on whatever the criteria is that you've set up, the initiating user is those individual students. And it will send them individual emails. It will not send everyone emails. This is an example of why we needed to understand the release conditions so that you get the idea of what the triggers are. So then now you understand how the triggers work. Okay. So with that, so we've got the two CC, BCC field if you want to use that. And then now you can come down to the email subject itself. And Dudley is having a question. So Dudley's question is, oh, Dudley had a couple of questions. I'm sorry. Okay. So the emails show up in the email list in Springboard. I don't really understand what that one means. Oh. We don't know if they show up in your set mail, but Wendy's going to go look at that right now. And then your next question was, you should tell students not to reply to these emails since the replies don't come to us. That is true. Yeah. Okay, so Dudley, it appears that they do not show up in the set mail. Where do you see them? Do you have to copy yourself on them to see them? Okay, so if you don't copy yourself on them, you won't see the email.
Well, you'll see that. The new version of the old version of the new version definitely has what went out.
Okay.
So
the update.
So when we upgrade, there'll be a history of who triggered what age.
Okay. So currently there's not, it doesn't go to your sent email, so you have to copy yourself on it to see who actually got the messages currently. But in the updated version of Springboard, it does include a history so that you can know who actually got it without having to sort through all of those emails.
Very excited about this upgrade.
Perfect. Okay. So now to get down into the body of this email, this is the typical HTML editor box that we have seen everywhere else in Springboard. The email subject underneath has a line, what replace strings can I use in this subject? Those of you who have the paper, they're listed on here, but they're also always listed on the link underneath. And this tells you exactly what information you can use. If you are familiar with release conditions from like news items and things like that, remember that we have to use the initiating user first name. So right here, initiating user rather than just first name or last name. You can put the name of the course, so like here when it says org name or org unit code or org unit code, all of those things. These have to do with the name of the course. So the org, which one is, so the org unit is the course. So this one that is org unit name is the name of the course. Okay. So let's say I wanted to do this initiating user first name. So org unit name is the name of the course. So I'm going to copy out the initiating user first name. I honestly don't ever type these out because they're just put right there for me. So I copy and paste them, that way I don't get them wrong. So you can put the name in the email subject itself, and then I can do, and then I could write out the body of this message and say something like, dear initiating user, as a reminder, our course policy suggests that you log into Springboard every X amount of days. If you don't do that, it's unlikely that you'll be successful in the course, something like that, in order to put it in the body of the email. And you have all the editing tools that you have other places in Springboard too. So this part is pretty straightforward. Does anybody have any questions about that? Does that part look familiar? Good. Okay, when we're done, we can click Save and Close. Now, I am going to unenable mine so that it doesn't send this to all of you who are enrolled in the retention classroom, but you can leave yours enabled if you're in the sandbox. And then I'm going to click Save and Close. And you can see that I now have a list of my intelligent agents. On this first page, so like when they copy over for the semester, on this first page, you can come through and you can check all the checkboxes, and you can click Enable here. But you still want to remember to make sure that everything is applicable. And when we click on, and then you can see here that this one is disabled, it gives me the key, which makes it easy to know. The last run date is helpful as well. When we click on the drop-down menu, I mentioned before that you can run these manually. Some of these, I can think of situations where it would be better to run them manually rather than having them run automatically. If it's something that you do periodically, not at a regular basis, you want to do it after you've graded a test or after you've graded an assignment, for example. You have it set up so that it'll run, and all you have to do is come in and click Run Now. Rather than having to write the whole email and everything, you can definitely use that. And then I can also edit my agent here.
Well, I could go to content and show how to do that.
So what Wendy's talking about is when we're talking about enabling and disabling these, you have the ability to come in at the end of the semester and disable them all, go in at the beginning of the semester, enable them, instead of setting dates on it. I personally would set the dates on it just so I don't mess it up, but that really comes down to your personal preference. But another thing that Wendy was talking about was how she frequently will leave notes to herself in Springboard, and one of the things that she might leave a note to herself about is to go turn off all the intelligent agents. And when she's talking about leaving notes to herself, do you just create a file? So she'll just go to the content page, create a file. If she's looking for a note to self,
Just like that.
she'll create the note. And then rather than clicking Publish, she'll click Save as Draft. And that way, when she goes to the content page, she'll know that for next time when she's coming back to whatever week this is, she'll check her note for note to self, and because it's set to draft, only she can see it, the students can't see it. So I think that's a good strategy.
You get frustrated and okay, next time I'm going to do that, and next time I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna
I could get you back to share that idea with you.
I'm gonna go back to the intelligent agents tool. And so we did the login reminder and we skipped the release conditions. I'm going to do a new one. You can follow along with me or you can just watch, whichever works for you. Because rather than doing the login history now, I'm going to make one that has to do with using release conditions. So I gave my example of doing a congratulations for the quiz 1. So I just titled it I'll set the status to enabled. I'm going to leave this off because I'm just using examples. I don't want these to actually run. Then I'm going to scroll down below the login activity, and we're going to look at release conditions. You can do attach existing. So in the previous screen, it was create or attach. From here, for some reason, they changed the labels, and now they're create and attach or attach existing. Here, we're going to do create and attach. And this gives us that exact same list of release conditions that we saw before. So I don't remember if I have any quizzes in here. I think I do have a quiz. So let's say that I want someone to have a specific score on a quiz, and I'm going to pick the quiz that I want them to do. This all looks very familiar from when we did release conditions and content, so they work the exact same. So I want students who got, let's do, or we can do between. Let's do between, and it gives me a range here. Or I could do greater than, less than, equal, all of those, not between. So let's say between an 8 and 100, I want to send them my congratulations email. So I'll click create, and you'll see that I have my release condition here. Remember that you can stack these. So maybe I wanted to do students who significantly improved. So a student who got below an 80% last time on one quiz, so I would create one that was below an 80% on the previous quiz, and then I would do got an 80% to 100 on this next quiz. I could stack those release conditions, and I could create a message that was congratulations on improving your grade, something like that. Okay, and then all of these are the exact same. You would just think through them based on the additional situation you set up. So we could do the first time. Since I'm doing a specific quiz, I probably only want to do it the first time. If I was doing something that was repeated, then maybe I would repeat it. But since I'm just doing this one individual quiz, let's do create, take action the first time, and then I can come right back to my email and compose the email. So I'll copy initiating user. I don't know why I copied more than I wanted. And then I could go in and compose my email to finish with that. So does that make sense?
You could stack every grade up there, right?
Yes, you can stack as many of these as you want.
The only thing is, so I have, like, this is a multiple quiz, it's not a 10, so I put in greater than 9, but it came up with greater on grade.
Yes, yes, that's a good point. So when you're, does it not have, when you did the greater than or equal to, did it not put the percent symbol? Oh, okay. So yes, if you specify a grade, it is a percentage rather than a number of points.
How would you do it? How would last quiz and that's 50%? How do you make people improve?
So you would, so let's say that this time they got on this specific quiz. So this tells me what the quiz name is, and I just happen to not have these named, quiz 1 and quiz 2. But let's say I did, so for this, let's imagine that this is quiz 2. So for quiz 2, they got between 80 and 100. I don't know why I did the range like that instead of greater than or equal to. But I can do create and attach another one that was score on a quiz, and I would ideally select a different quiz. Oh, what are you asking?
You're saying, is there a way, and I'm trying to think how you actually do this, unless you can think of it. Is there a way for Springboard to know your score is higher than the last time? So you have quiz 1 and quiz 2, on quiz 2 you scored better than quiz 1. Yeah, that's
Yes, that's what I was talking about. Because you don't, it's not one release condition, it's 2 release conditions. So you would say quiz 1, the condition would be quiz 1 you got let's say less than 80% or less than 70%. And then quiz 2, you got a higher range, so between 70 and 100 or between 80 and 100. So you would have those 2 release conditions that you would put together. That was the first quiz was a low grade, the second quiz was a higher grade, and that's how it would figure it out. It would essentially look up both scores. Yes, you don't have to put in any of this information. It automatically figures out based on what their scores were. It'll pull that information to know whether or not they have triggered that intelligent agent.
What I want to do, what would be nice, I can't think how to do it, would be, so that will work, score better than 80, score less than 80, 20 tests is better than that. It'd be nice if the student scored 40 the first time, now they have 65. Okay, we're moving in the right direction. I can't.
You would just do the same thing. You would set those thresholds.
You just create multiple.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
One thing that I
like think through every scenario, everything. You can always figure out the issue better.
Yeah.
It
can't say you just did better in general. You have to specify what those ranges are. Yeah. I can't think of.
I'll think about it.
Okay.
But other than that,
yeah.
We just have to kind of think through a couple of the most common.
Yeah. One important thing to note about intelligent agents is they don't work with the attendance tool. So there is an attendance tool in Springboard, and we don't talk about it very often because it's not tied to the gradebook and it's not tied to intelligent agents. So it's kind of just like a way to track this information that doesn't interact with other things. But what I did in my course, because I'm teaching a face-to-face course, is I put my attendance in my gradebook because it's worth points every day, and I made each day its own grade item, and I set up the release conditions so that, I set up an intelligent agent so that if a student got a 0 for attendance on this individual day, it sends them an email reminder about our attendance policy. So the attendance tool can't do that, but if you take a grade for each individual attendance, each day of attendance, you can set up an intelligent agent to do that. So that works too. Okay, so that is the gist of all of this. Like with the release conditions tool, there are lots of different ways that you can be strategic about this. So we scheduled our session to go till 11 o'clock. We are happy to stick around and keep strategizing through all of this. I will keep the WebEx open for your questions because now comes the fun part, which is looking at your courses and figuring out how these things might be applicable to you. I will say that, yeah.
Did you show them the email settings in the
No,
you have the tablet?
I do.
I think.
Do you want to show? Because I haven't looked at this page. What else is there to see besides this?
That's it.
Oh, okay. Okay, so, no, that's totally fine. No, I completely agree with you. So this is just a screenshot of what the new D2L looks like in terms of setting up the email address that your intelligent agents come from, and then the reply to email address if you wanted them to be different for some reason. But you can set these custom values and just put your own email address in there. And correct.
Right. But we're actually logged into the real site that will become ours. So this is how it works in fall. And that will be and that will be the big option.
Yes.
There'll just be a setting over on the right when you click on. Just so you know, the site is very much like this.
So the new site looks visually different, but most of it works in a very similar way. Once you get your bearings and the fact that the colors are different, you'll feel like you know what's going on. But when I come into Intelligent Agents, I just click on Settings, and this is where I can find those email addresses.
But I am very excited to see it. And it will, personally for us, it gets the email and find stuff. We're excited to do this. So soon, a couple more months we'll have it. And people work the way we want it to.
Yes. Okay. So remember I mentioned earlier that when you start thinking about these things, it will feel like you have so much work done in order to set up these strategies, whether with release conditions or intelligent agents. Remember that you don't have to get it all done at once. You don't have to put a release condition on every single item in your course. I encourage you to be strategic with your release conditions and use them when you think it's most appropriate, rather than feeling like you have to put them everywhere. If you have a good reason to use it, then do. If you don't have a good reason, don't worry about it, because you're just creating extra work for yourself that won't have a significant impact on your students because you don't have an intentional pedagogical reason in order to use those release conditions. With intelligent agents, I encourage you to maybe think of a couple that you would want to use for one semester and see how that goes, rather than trying to dig in and create a list of 50 intelligent agents for all the different things that you use. I will say one of the tools or one of the resources that I provided for you with this workshop is I should probably have labeled this video. So I had the case study on intelligent agents, and then it's Jacqueline Broadbent, how she set up intelligent agents. This is that psychologist that I was talking about. She created a 9-minute YouTube video that shows you all of the intelligent agents you use in your course. She used in her course, if you want to get some ideas. So that's available too. I'm going to delete this note to self.
Can I say one more thing?
Yes.
One other thing to think about that I like, some we know students don't always do. One thing you can do is an announcement on the home. That's really strategy. So I have one that says, "Your students have not read the syllabus." And that this message will go away. I make it very ugly. This message will go away when she's not actually read the syllabus.
That's a really good point.
So the announcements are a little bit harder to understand.
So Wendy is saying that we know that students don't always read email, and we go through all this work to set up the intelligent agents. And sometimes an easier way to communicate specific information to students is just creating a big news item, because you can do release conditions on the news items, put a big picture in it, make it funny colors and stuff so it's hard for them to visually miss, and tell them in the intelligent agent, when you've completed this action that I'm telling you that you didn't do, this will disappear. So you haven't read the syllabus yet, go read it. Or you haven't taken your quiz and it's due tomorrow, things like that. You can use release conditions to do all of that if you feel like your students are not using the intelligent agents, or even because I know intelligent agents are a little more time consuming. Try both strategies and see which one works better for you and your students.
Yeah, I never said agents, but announcements, you haven't opened it. Yeah. So, and I've done things like this, things that will get there.